For more on the COP30 meeting, I'm joined by Paul Bledsoe, a leading voice on the topic of climate change and a former Clinton White House climate advisor. First of all, great having you. Second, with Brazil kicking off COP30 in the Amazon, is this about presenting the best political backdrop possible?
Well, it's really about saving the planet and our people from devastating climate change impacts. Already, there was a new report by the Lancet in Britain this month that showed that there are 500,000 deaths from extreme heat around the world and $1 trillion in costs from climate change induced extreme weather. So this is a huge economic and public safety issue already. And I'm afraid only about 40% of the countries in Brazil have offered new, deeper emissions cuts, although there was good news out of Europe, who did offer a much deeper cut a couple of days ago. The U.S. is not there. Donald Trump is on the wrong side of this issue. He's turned it into a political culture war when it's really about the safety, security, and the economy of the American people. So I'm afraid there's tremendous work to be done. I'm hopeful. I heard President Macron yesterday call for a global agreement of the willing nations to reduce methane, a key super gas. I think it's important that we recognize progress, but we have tremendous way to go. There was a new report by the UN that if our current policies continue, the 1.5 degrees Celsius warming we've already experienced will be roughly doubled by mid-century. So we are really in danger of the climate spinning out of control.
Paul, you mentioned a series of initiatives, and host Brazil is also pushing for a 1.3 trillion climate finance plan. Do you believe this will materialize?
There is some good news out of the private sector. Banks and financial institutions around the world are beginning to recognize that their own long-term viability is connected to the natural world and the climate. And they have begun to invest more in developing nations around the world. Not enough, not nearly enough, but I believe that the private sector is beginning to pull its weight. I'm afraid it's the public sector that has not done nearly enough.
I see, and I want to present a situation, because if Venice, for example, floods, every year, yet we're still talking and not acting, how do we get the world to abandon this seemingly, this Groundhog Day environmental summit routine?
That's right, Diego. In fact, the United States is incredibly vulnerable to climate change, not just sea level rise, but huge flooding in the southeast, fires throughout the western United States. We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars in economic costs a year. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. But China is very vulnerable along the South China Sea to sea level rise, also flooding in its interior. So all nations are vulnerable. No nation can stop extreme climate change. It will affect everyone. Therefore, we have got to begin cutting major emissions seriously. And the tip of the spear in climate protection is reducing methane. Methane is a greenhouse gas 80 times more powerful than CO2. It accounts for about 35% of warming. But if we reduce methane seriously, especially from oil and gas at the beginning, over the next decade to a decade and a half, we can limit near-term temperatures and avoid climate change tipping points in natural systems that, if we allow to happen, could overwhelm our efforts on climate change. So cutting methane, CO2, and the other super pollutants is crucial. That's why I think President Macron, Barbados Prime Minister Mia Mottley, and others are calling for this methane agreement between at least countries that can support one now.
Paul Bledsoe, thanks. Great having you.